The story of Illinois Congressman and Senate candidate Mark Kirk is the story of the little political scandal that could. What started as a fairly minor dust-up over Congressman Kirk's military record has blossomed into the most amazing Senate candidate story of the season, which is pretty incredible when you consider that the competition includes Rand Paul in Kentucky, now just as famous for his position, sort of, on the Civil Rights Act, as he is for being his father's son. Also, Sue Loudon of Nevada, whose plan to solve the healthcare crisis through chicken bartering has created a run on chicken suits. But Mark Kirk beats them both. Congressman Kirk becomes more fabulous with every new thing we learn about him, with every new detail the Chicago media turns up about him. And by fabulous, I do not mean awesome, I mean fabulist. I mean, the man has an incredible imagination. He has made up an amazing array of stuff over the course of his public career. And the more you look at his public statements, the more whoppers you find. Now, this all started because after Connecticut Democratic Senate candidate Richard Blumenthal got national attention for misstating his Vietnam-era service records, it started to become a problem for Congressman Mark Kirk that he had repeatedly claimed to have once been named the Intelligence Officer of the Year by the U.S. Navy. Turns out that only happened inside Mark Kirk's own mind. Mark Kirk was not ever named the Intelligence Officer of the Year by the Navy. That award does exist. There is a Naval Reserve Intelligence Analyst of the Year. It was never, ever Mark Kirk. Mark Kirk was in a unit in Italy that once got an intelligence award from a professional group, not from the Navy. But when he was caught, he tried to make it seem like a harmless little mistake on his website. This award, that award, Navy, a private organization, me, this giant unit of other people. What's the difference?
We misidentified the award. I actually received the Rufus Taylor Intelligence Unit of the Year award, but we misidentified it. And so when the staff saw that it was a different title, we changed my official biography.
See how he also made it sound like the whole thing was just a typo? Just a teeny tiny little mistake on his campaign website? Turns out the exaggeration also showed up in one of his campaign ads and in something he spit from his very own mouth in Congress in front of the C-SPAN cameras.
The Navy named Mark Intelligence Officer of the Year for his combat service in Kosovo.
I've been in office just 1 year. Before that, I was a Navy Reserve Intelligence Officer, was the Navy's Intelligence Officer of the Year in 1998.
No, you weren't. While he was kind of sort of half apologizing over that mistake, that repeated mistake, Congressman Kirk took special care to make it seem like the error was discovered by his own staff, proactively checking his record for accuracy. Writing in a blog entry late last month, quote, "The error was discovered last week by my staff." But it turns out even Mark Kirk's account of how he came to correct the record about the award he didn't receive, even that is made up. In fact, the Navy told Congressman Kirk that reporters were investigating his Intelligence Officer of the Year claim, and the Navy reminded him that he didn't win that award. Ultimately, in an interview with the Sun-Times, Congressman Kirk apologized for a, quote, casualness with which he has described his, quote, military details, saying of the award he didn't receive that he simply misremembered it wrong. Wait a minute. Mark Kirk's supposed to be a former school teacher, too, isn't he? Did he really say he misremembered it wrong?
I simply misremembered it wrong.
Okay, he misremembered it wrong. Now, if it were just this one thing that Mark Kirk had invented about himself, or misremembered wrong about himself, that would be one thing. And quite frankly, that might be enough to scupper his chances as a Senate candidate, particularly one who really wants to run on his military record. But it's not all. It turns out that lots of things Mark Kirk has been saying about his military record are things that only happened in Mark Kirk's mind.
The last time I was in Iraq, I was in uniform, flying at 20,000 feet, and the Iraqi Air Defense Network was shooting at us. That force is now gone.
He's talking about the year 2000 when he flew missions over Iraq, and it turns out there's no record of his aircraft being fired on. Congressman Kirk also claimed on his website to be, quote, the only member of Congress to serve in Operation Iraqi Freedom. Congressman Kirk did not serve in Operation Iraqi Freedom. He did not serve in Iraq during that war. Congressman Kirk also claimed in a letter sent out to his district last year to be a veteran of Operation Desert Storm, the first Iraq war. And that is fake icing on the fake cake, because Congressman Kirk did not participate in that war either. But here's what really makes the Mark Kirk story fabulous. Here's what makes this the little Senate campaign scandal that could. Mark Kirk, it turns out, doesn't just make stuff up about his own military combat record, or lack thereof. He also makes stuff up about the world at large. Check this out. Here's Mark Kirk in a radio interview. This was in 2008, talking about why the U.S. should expand offshore oil drilling. Listen to this.
Makes no sense to allow the Chinese to drill on the Cuban side of the line in Florida without us tapping into the very same oil field.
See, we should be drilling for oil off the coast of Florida because the Chinese are drilling off the coast of Cuba, except the Chinese are not drilling off the coast of Cuba, not even a little bit. That's made up. Also on the subject of oil, here's another Mark Kirk gem from the same year, from 2008.
We have a fundamental choice. We need to get off oil, but for the time being, we are still dependent on it. We can either buy 80 billion barrels of oil from the Iranians or from ourselves, and we should buy it from ourselves.
Except we're not buying any oil from Iran. Mark Kirk apparently just made that up, too. And then there was this long, complicated story he told about France and pirates. Genius. I just want you to follow this for a second because it is a really great story and none of it is true. Lynn Sweet at the Chicago Sun-Times dug up this story and has been looking into it, and other reporters at the Chicago Sun-Times, forgive me. And every single part of this story, as told by Mark Kirk, is made up. Here it is.
We began to see some backbone, first not from the United States, but from France. France was always good for a quick $2 million ransom, until the election of President Sarkozy. When his first ship was seized, he authorized the standard ransom payment with a transmitter in the box.
Great story. But we have to stop there just for a second because that's already not true. The mission that Congressman Kirk is about to describe was not the result of the first ship seized after President Sarkozy took office. So there's already some stuff that's made up. But let's go back to the story.
As that went into the pirate compound, he then authorized French special forces to roll in, and they killed everybody.
Great story. Also made up. According to President Sarkozy, those French special forces did not kill anybody. They caught 6 pirates and took them back to France and put them on trial. Another 4 pirates escaped. But the fake story gets better. Here's the last part.
It kind of shocked us in the Pentagon. But it sent a clear message. And I don't think the French have had many problems since.
What a great story. Also, that part of it totally made up, too. That mission did not end France's pirate problem. French ships have been attacked since that operation. And if you add that all up, what you're left with is the fact that none of the facts of that story were true. None of them. None. Which is hard to do to tell such an elaborate foreign policy story that is entirely invented. It's hard to tell any story that doesn't accidentally just have something in it that's true. But if anybody can do it, it's Mark Kirk. So Mark Kirk is becoming nationally famous as the guy who makes stuff up, who makes up everything. But do you remember the first time he was ever featured on this show? The first time we ever highlighted Mark Kirk as a politician on this show was last June. He has served as a naval reservist with distinction. He talks about that sometimes. He had come back from a visit to China and said that while he was there, he met with high-ranking Chinese government officials. He told them not to trust the government of the United States. He told the Chinese not to trust our country in what we said about economic policy. China, he said, should believe him, Mark Kirk, but not believe the government of the United States. Now, at that time, I thought that made Mark Kirk seem a little, I don't know, a little undercutting one's own nation with a foreign power-ish. What do you call that? But now, given what we've learned about Mark Kirk, I actually feel much more at ease about that story. Because he probably just made that up, too. It's the one silver lining here. If Mark Kirk hasn't done any of the good things he says he's done, he probably hasn't done any of the horrifying things he said he's done either. At least here's hoping.